Good morning, good morning. It is Tuesday, March 11th, 2025, and I am up and out. I'm ready to get the day rolling. Check the streams, make sure we're streaming. Looks good, looks good. Welcome, welcome. My name is Keith, and I am your host today at Dev Jobs Daily. I stream 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, starting at 8 a.m. Normally wrapping up at 9 a.m., but this week is a little different. I am broadcasting live from Austin, Texas. And every year in March, this week in March of Austin puts on a big to-do, a conference, several conferences all around the same time, and one of those conferences is a big interactive conference called South by Southwest Interactive. That is going on this week. It really kicked off last week for me, and it is changing my normal daily routine. Lots of things to do and see, people to meet, opportunities to bump into some people, and I'm taking full advantage of that, as you should be too if you are in the Austin area. This stream was created as a way to kind of have a place to check in the morning for people who are in tech looking for jobs. Hardest thing about getting a job is staying committed and consistent about the job search. You know, lots of unfun stuff about looking for a job. A lot of putting things out into the ether and getting nothing back. A lot of getting some rejection. A lot of scams that reach out and seem good and then end up being a waste of your time. All that stuff sucks about getting a job. But the only thing you can control is get up in the morning and get more job apps out. So I'm going to be your buddy. I'll be your accountability buddy. I'm going to be here Monday through Friday. And it'll be a place to just check in while we're hanging out for the next 25 minutes or so. We're going to check the latest job numbers, talk a little bit about what's going on in the greater tech world in terms of news stories. Then that's about all we'll have time to wrap up before we wrap it up today. But this show is sponsored by my app, an app that I created that costs nothing. It's completely free to you. And it is an app to help you find things to do around town during South by Southwest, things that are free to do around South by Southwest. There's a nice filtering system in here, so I could turn all these on and zoom out a little and see a little more of what's going on. We're about halfway through the week. As a matter of fact, it was basically 10 days to start off with. I had 240 events over that 10-day period in the app. We're about halfway there now. And you can see that you can find interesting things to do, especially things that are close by. So if you end up at an event like I was yesterday, and we're a little bored, wasn't quite what you expected, you could throw open the map and check and see, 2 blocks away there's something interesting, maybe interesting going on over there. Let me just bail on this snooze fest and move over to somewhere else and check something else out. Super good for that. We are starting to get into more of the music stuff. So there are more music festivals, events going on, free shows to hear a bunch of bands. You'll see a few more of those, but there's still plenty of tech stuff going on today and tomorrow. Digital Social Mixer, Batter Up Austin, Berlin Flats still going on. It started yesterday. Future Middleware, VC fund of funds. Lots of things going on today. Texas House, all the houses. Australia House, still going strong. So, check those out, and maybe I'll see you at one of the events. Okay, let's look at the numbers. Every day I search. Get up in the morning, I check the latest job postings for web developers, and I record them and build these charts and graphs. And I've been doing it for almost 3 years. 3 years worth of data. I don't look at the whole 3 years very much, but it is more instructional to look at what's going on in the last week, the last 6 months, and the last year. That'll give us a sense of kind of what the trend line is in the industry. In the last week, we see a slight dip, but started to rebound a little bit today. So, it's roughly been basically flat. In the last 6 months, we're seeing a trend line heading up, and we like to see that for sure. 6 months ago, it was a lot harder to get a job than it is today in terms of number of job postings out there. We were averaging about 30 postings a day. Then we're up over 50. We're closer to 60 on average job postings a day. And again, you're not going to get 60 out a day, so there's plenty for you to get up and get hustling for. Right? Then we look at the last year. It's slightly downturn there, but primarily because this year, while it got off to a great start, has really struggled with this new administration and the choices that they're making. It's affecting a lot of aspects of industry, and hiring is one of them. We've talked about it a bunch on this feed that when business is uncertain, when the stock market is uncertain, they react. And right now, this week and last week, the stock market has been down a bunch. So that makes companies feel very uncomfortable, and when they're uncomfortable, they circle the wagons, they do less hiring. So a lot of companies have hiring freezes on. I've been seeing the word hiring freeze a lot more in the news lately. Not great for us. Not great for us in terms of like we were hoping for growth, but it's roughly been staying flat. Again, better than it was 6 months ago, but not as good as it was a year ago. I was expecting to be beating these numbers by now, but nope, we're at the mercy of some headwinds right now that we can't control. Let's look at Indeed. Indeed is a place where you need to be spending a lot of time if you're in the job search. That's where recruiters are looking for people. That's where you're doing research on companies you're applying for. That's where you're reaching out to your network and letting them know that you're in the market looking for work. But it's also got a nice little news feed feature that every morning has at least like 2 or 3 stories that are giving us, a sense of what's going on in the industry. Apple came out with their line of new Mac stuff to a lot of yawns. Growth fears rattle markets. Let's take a look at that. Harvard freezes hiring. This is an offensive one, but it doesn't affect us very much. .com fears resurface in the AI boom. AI is permeating the job market. Let's check that out. Ontario, in response to the threats of tariffs decided to put their tariffs on anyway. Uber, Lyft get a rideshare rival. That's interesting. And robo-taxis are taking over Austin. You certainly see a bunch of them on the streets of downtown. I live on the outskirts of town. I live south of town. Basically, the last highway exit on the way out of town. We don't see them much in our neighborhood. These taxis are still fenced in to a relatively short area between around the downtown area, in part because they're not all. It's not really full self-driving. It's what they did in a lot of ways is they just set cars around and scanned this area, and then they trained them on this area to be very good at moving around this small zone of influence. Now, during South by Southwest, that's perfectly fine. Most people are at hotels that are relatively close to downtown, and some people are just moving from event to event, and they need to get there quickly, so hopping in a quick car and going 10 blocks to another event can be very helpful, right? And this is definitely where things are going, but they're not going to be in my neighborhood running around anytime soon, just because there's just too many variables there. We'll see. Market growth rattles the growth fears rattle the market. By growth, I mean not the stock market, not hiring. Global stocks showed signs of steady early Tuesday after fresh worries about the U.S. economy shook the markets on Monday. NASDAQ recorded its worst day in 2 years, and all three major indices were sent back to pre-election levels. Concerns have grown that the Trump administration's trade policies, spending could cut the risk, could risk recession and higher inflation. A sharp drop in tech stocks also weighed on the market, while Tesla dropped 15%, down 45% from December peak. U.S. microdata is cooling. Trade and economic policy uncertainty is elevated. This is jarring against the stretched stock valuations in the U.S. Also seems that the Bassett put has a lower strike price than many traders assumed. This is another thing that we'll be talking about on one of these other stories. Is in general, there's been a lot of concern that a lot of companies are overvalued. The stock valuations are a little hot anyway, and so a correction. We've been talking about a correction for over a year, and so some people are trying to spin this. Maybe this is just the correction we need. Maybe we need to cool down some of these valuations. We'll see. Time will tell. The threat of losing federal funding has hit research universities hard, including Ivy League institutions. Harvard is the latest to announce a staff and faculty hiring freeze, saying the move will help maintain financial flexibility during Trump-era uncertainty. Cornell and Columbia have instituted similar pullbacks, such as Stanford and MIT. At the same time, many of these universities are rescinding offers to graduate students as a program shrink. If this was a local community college, if this was, some small college or university, I would say that would be a perfectly appropriate thing. But screw these guys, man. They are sitting on literally $1 billion worth of, a stockpile of cash. And if you're not saving that for a rainy day, what are you saving it for? And this is a rainy day. There's no reason for you to make a big show of the fact that, we're going to have to rescind some offers to graduate students because, the $1 billion endowment that we're sitting on right now, just can't take that strain and stress. It's just offensive. No new researchers to study cancer cures, educators to prepare the next generation. Yeah. It's also offensive that there we go. So again, Harvard, the richest university, is sitting on a $53 billion endowment. $53 billion they're just sitting on, and they can't. All right? You say you don't want to, grow. Okay, that's fine, but a hiring freeze to replace people that leave. That's just offensive on so many levels. Screw them. It's been 25 years since the dot-com bubble peaked and then sent overhyped tech stocks plummeting. As Wall Street Journal notes, some investors are concerned about parallels in the current artificial intelligence boom. While only time will tell how AI plays out, several tech giants emerged from the seeds planted during the dot-com era. That period had traits of what investors call a good bubble, which fueled tech adoption, as opposed to a bad bubble based on unproductive speculation. We've been hearing this talk on and off for the last 18 months as these, the land rush. We've been through a number of these kind of false starts in the last 10 years, whether it was AR and VR, blockchain nonsense that happened multiple times with that, the NFT thing, right? There were all these things that these tech VCs were trying to shove down our throats that, in general, we just rejected for a number of different reasons, but just did not click, and it was trying to be forced down our throat. And VCs' jobs are to get a return on their investment. And one of the ways that they do that is by essentially rigging the game, right? If they all, not necessarily in a coordinated collusion, but just in a coordinated self-interest, all decide, oh, your company's worth, $1 billion, my company's worth $2 billion. Oh, your company's worth $2 billion, my company's worth $5 billion. These numbers do get inflated. None of these, aside from OpenAI and one or two other companies, none of them are even making money, much less making enough money to pay back their investors. So, to say that they're at a $50 billion valuation or $80 billion valuation, those numbers don't mean anything. They're just nonsense numbers. And ChatGPT has, gotten a huge adoption, fastest software adoption in history. But in order to stay in front, they just have to spend so much money. And definitely in the last 6 months, there's been a lot of wolves at the door, nipping at their heels. And in order to stay just 5% ahead, they have to spend so much more money to do that. The good bubble, bad bubble stuff is interesting because, when the dot-com boom crashed, I was working in tech starting in 93. So I was right there, making really good money in 99, and actually had a startup of my own around that time. Raised some money pretty easily. And then everything collapsed, right? But in it, the companies which were overvalued, they all, many of them went out of business. All of them really struggled. But what stuck around was the fact that people did get used to this internet thing, and it was growing, and people were finding ways to utilize it. And since there were growing numbers of people utilizing the internet, that paved the way for Google to come in post the dot-com bubble. And a number of other big companies in that downturn were started, which helped fuel the next growth in the market. So, could be the same thing here. Could be. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. AI is permeating the job market. AI-related job listings may represent a fraction of the overall market, but they're growing fast as ads shot up 68% from the release of ChatGPT in 2022 through the end of last year. Yet relatively few are for purely AI positions. Companies are mostly looking for people who have experience or knowledge integrating AI into jobs that already exist. The surge has partly taken the place of the post-pandemic hiring rush. Yeah. I mean, I'm telling all of our students to include at least one AI application in their portfolio right now. It's just easier to catch somebody's eye if you've built an AI application right now. If you can put AI in your resume. It's not a panacea. It's not going to immediately open the doors. But it's just one more tactic that you want to employ. It's going to catch somebody's eye. You know, the goal in the job search is to create a resume, create your LinkedIn, create your portfolio with the goal of doing one thing, and that's getting somebody on the phone, right? You know, they're going to be looking at a stack of other resumes and LinkedIns, and you know, they're weeding through them with the goal of, you know, getting to a small number of people they're willing to get on the phone and take to the next level, right? And so everything is about catching somebody's eye and getting them to say, hey, remember that person with the AI thing on their resume? Call them in. They seem like a, you know, somebody who's paying attention to what's going on in tech right now. Ride-hailing and mobility company Bolt already has a presence in Europe, Africa, and Latin America, and now beginning to invade North America, putting Uber and Lyft on notice. Bolt CEO tells the information he plans to compete against his larger rivals by operating leaner and paying drivers more. While Uber and Lyft may have a take rate of up to 35%, Bolt keeps 15 to 20%, so drivers can keep as much as 85% of their fares. Yeah, I mean, you know, where those, you know, in the first run up when Uber and Lyft made their way into Austin and other North American cities, there were a lot of Johnny-come-latelys all trying to do the same thing because, again, they're just a piece of software. And so if you can knock off the software relatively quickly, there's not a whole lot of a moat there in terms of, it really just comes down to, it's a two-sided marketplace. Do you have enough drivers? Do you have enough customers? How do you get drivers if you don't have any customers? How do you get customers if you don't have any drivers? You got to make it attractive to bring those in. So a lot of those wannabe Johnny-come-lately companies, they try to compete on, you know, paying the drivers more. But by then, enough people that already had the Uber and Lyft apps on their phones, they didn't really need another one. Again, if the service is good enough and you don't have to install software, you don't have to learn a new interface, you don't have to do any of that kind of stuff, people are going to go where there's less friction. And Uber, you know, made a lot of enemies along the way, especially in Austin. I have never had the Uber app on my phone. Screw those guys. And when I've needed a ride, I get Lyft. But I don't see there be any reason for me to install Bolt. Lyft is fine. It's good enough. And you know, you can say you got a lot of drivers, but you still got to get the customers. And now you've got two well-entrenched competitors. There's always going to be somebody who's, upset with both of them and looking for an alternative, but enough to build a business on. I'm not sure if there's enough, because you still have regular taxis, you have shuttle buses, you have a lot of other ways that people do move around a city. I just don't know. I mean, if anything, Lyft is the Pepsi to Uber's Coke. Like, they're considerably smaller, and they've tried a whole lot of things for years now to gain market share, and they haven't made much of a dent in it. And they got in early, so good luck with somebody trying to compete with that. Yeah, these are the Waymos. Saw a bunch of them in the last week. Texas has relatively lax regulations for self-driving cars, making Austin an ideal staging ground for testing. Some state lawmakers are looking to tighten up the rules, however. It is interesting, though. They have... we're not seeing all kinds of stories. When they first came to town, there was another one. I forget the name of the other one. That ended up essentially completely pulling out and going out of business, essentially. And there were all these videos of people like taking the thing, and it would get stuck in a loop. It would just keep circling a block instead of taking them where they're supposed to be, or it gets stuck in a turning lane and wouldn't turn. There were all these videos of like these cars lined up because there was like a black hole that once they got into this intersection, they could never get out of it. We're not seeing any of those videos now, so they've done something to improve it. And that was a year ago, maybe. Again, all these things, generally speaking, are getting better. The more they drive, the more training material that they have to learn from. So over time, they definitely will get better. But it's interesting. All right, we're getting down to it. Again, this is South by Southwest week. So normally I broadcast from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. But because this South by Southwest is in town and there are a lot of events to go to, I generally, with my job, have my mornings free and work in the afternoons and evenings. So this is my time to sort of jump out and hit some of those events bright and early before I have to be back at 1 o'clock to kind of start my day. If you are interested in going to any South by Southwest events, check out my free app. It is at sxfreesw.com. sxfreesw.com. That is southbyfreesouthwest.com. Not affiliated with South by. And again, most of these events are not affiliated either. Some of them were. There's still a couple that are, I think, but by and large, these are all just third-party events, or maybe they're companies that have that are taking part in South by Southwest. Maybe they got a booth, maybe they're doing that, but they're also looking to create a little extra showcase around town in there. So lots of fun things to check out. Again, come noon or 1 o'clock, there'll be a dozen different events going on, and that'll stretch out into the evening. Come evening, there'll probably be about 15 different simultaneous events to check out. So take a look, share it with your friends if you know anybody in town who is going to South by Southwest. Send them to sxfreesw.com. We don't ask for anything in return. No email addresses, no account creation, none of that stuff. Just hit it. open up, find some apps that you like. I got a little favoriting feature there. You can click that favorite button and then filter by favorites, and then that's all you see. So check it out. Useful app. Alright guys, we're going to wrap it up here right now, and we will see you in 23 hours and 23 hours and 30 minutes. That's what we're going to see you. Have a good one, and we'll